Hello, I'm Suzanne Smith. For a big part of the state's history, there was a lot of undeveloped swampland in Florida. So how did Florida become known as a tropical paradise? Author Henry Knight looks at the development and impact of this transformation in his book, Tropic of Hopes, California, Florida, and the Selling of American Paradise, 1869 to 1929. Mr. Knight joins us to talk about this journey. Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question is, okay, how did you get interested in this topic? Because California, Florida, not so close together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my background was initially I looked at California, and I wanted to, you know, there's a trope in California history that it's an exception, that it's somewhere different, and I think that exists a little bit in Florida studies as well. But I got interested in that comparison because I think there are some similarities, things to do with agriculture, climate, and also ideas of leisure. I think in this period begin to connect them, and so for me they made a distinctive pair. With enough differences, enough similarities to make a kind of comparative approach work.
So how did they, why, actually I guess the question is not just how did they do this, but why did they feel that they need to sell these areas to other people?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said in your introduction, Florida at this point, late 19th century, is often associated in the American imagination as a kind of a swamp and not a particularly desirable place to go to. California, it's more, I'd say the southern part of California is actually associated with arid, desert kind of place, again, not particularly welcoming or attractive. So the book looks at, in the period after the railroads kind of reach California, and also it becomes a little bit easier to get to Florida by train, the need for developers to begin to attract tourists and settlers to sell land, to you know, fill hotels, to buy train tickets. You know, their business is to attract Americans to these places, and they have to challenge those preconceptions about these places.
So how did they do that? How did they challenge these preconceptions?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, one of the arguments here is how they use climate, because one of the concerns for a lot of Americans, I think in the Northeast and the Midwest, is that you go to a hotter climate, it's going to impact on your life. You may become lazy. You know, it's going to be hard to be productive. You know, and I think one of the things these promoters do for selling land is that they present a kind of lifestyle, an agricultural lifestyle, which isn't as hard work, but is just as independent and just as productive. So citrus, for example, you can come own a small citrus farm in Florida or in California. You can be independent, you can be a farmer, but it's not the hard, lonely lifestyle, say, of a Midwestern farm. And then in terms of leisure, I mean, then it's a slightly different idea, but it's that you can come for the winter, perhaps, and escape the hardships of you know, a northern winter, and in that sense they use climate in different ways to try and attract different types of Americans to these states.
What kind of challenges did you have in focusing on two different states on a similar topic?
Yeah, I mean, there's double the amount, say, of scholarship. Obviously, you know, there aren't many books or articles that look at both of them together. So you're really looking at California and you're looking at, you know, the history around Florida. I think the interesting thing that's became apparent to me quite early on is that there are similarities there. They hadn't been teased out perhaps that much, but you start looking at some of the themes around leisure and agriculture, histories of California, histories of Florida, similar ideas, and actually similar you know, individuals in some cases, promoters who worked in Florida who went to California. So for me, it was challenging, but I realized quite early on that, you know, this comparison works, I think, because of those links.
What were some of the long-term impacts of selling Florida as a tropical paradise, when everybody who knows here, there's some truth to that and then there's some non-truth to that? What kind of impact did that have on the environment or other areas?
Yeah, I mean, environmentally, I think one of the big booster visions is drainage, so draining kind of parts of the peninsula in particular, and you get that especially with the Everglades in the early first 2 decades of the 20th century, real effort to drain the Everglades, and the kind of environmental damage of that is pretty massive, I think, and you know that is an issue that is still very important in Florida today. But for these boosters, you know, there weren't a lot of kind of concerns, I suppose, because they saw it as making this habitable, you know, opening up what they saw as kind of prime real estate to settlers. And there was an idea that you could do this by digging these canals across South Florida, draining the water level, and in theory, you'd then be able to live there. But the environmental damage it did was pretty significant.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And congratulations on your award.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
The Florida Book Awards are presented annually to recognize, honor, and celebrate the best Florida literature. The program is coordinated by the Florida State University Libraries and co-sponsored by these groups that promote books by and for all Floridians.